Good afternoon, everyone. So for today's discussion, we will tackle about developing performance tasks. So since first year, we already know what is performance task or PT, as this is part of our final requirements every semester. Just recently, we've done portfolios, journals, demo teaching, 3D scaffolding, and many more. So before we start our discussion, let's read the learning outcomes. At the end of the lesson, students are expected to define performance tasks, design performance tasks using the GRASS model, and develop different kinds of scoring rubrics to integrate authentic assessments. So let's define what is performance task. Performance task is any learning activity or assessment that asks students to perform and demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and proficiency. Performance tasks yield a product and performance that serves as evidence of learning. Well-designed performance tasks are based on needs as determined by your course objectives and available resources, authentic to both real-world activities and your students' life experiences. Contextualized by providing a thorough description of the background so students can imagine themselves in the situation. So example of this is a 3D scaffolding we created in modern geometry as part of our final performance task. Also in Math 20, we have conducted survey. Then we choose what type of sampling method and graphs we have to apply based on what we learn. And we have to integrate what we have understand in the given lesson or discussions. Another performance task that we did was in PED 4 Assessment of Learning 1, in which we submitted portfolio that comprises compilation of reflection journals, lesson plan, table of specifications, test questionnaire, item analysis, and frequency table. As what we observed, we integrate our learnings throughout the semester. Performance tasks yield tangible product or performance that serves as evidence of learning. So example of performance tasks that we created is the 3D model, portfolio, and scaffolding. Designing performance tasks, step-by-step procedure. The first step, determine the purpose of the assessment. So you have to determine what is the purpose of your assessment to be done. Second, specify the skills and outcomes along with the respective taxonomic level. So we all know that the Bloom's taxonomy comprises cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, and affective domain. Third step, create an authentic and meaningful context for the task. So your task should be authentic or original. Fourth step, develop a scoring instrument. So later on, my colleague will discuss what is the scoring rubric. The fifth step, generate or select exemplary student responses. So you have to validate student responses based on what they learn and what should be improved. The final step, revise the task as necessary. So if there is a necessary to be revised, then you have to revise the task for your students to integrate and know more and understand the lesson that you have provided to them. So we continue with the GRASS model. GRASS model, it is used as a tool to design and develop performance tasks that serves as a guide in teaching learning process. So who advocated the GRASS model? These are J. McTighe and Grant Wiggins. So J. McTighe and Grant Wiggins are the proponents of the GRASS model. GRASS stands for G. Goal, R. Role, A. Audience, S. Situation, P. Product or performance, and lastly S. Standards. So goal. What is the goal or challenge statement in the scenario? So this states what should be the outcome that we want our students to develop and perform. For example, in PED 4 or Assessment of Learning 1, As we created lesson plan, test questionnaire, and so on, we have reached our objectives, which is to develop our skills on how to create questionnaires or assessment and lesson plan in the future. Next, role. What role will the students play in the scenario? So, for that particular performance task, our role is that we act like a teacher in high school in mathematics subjects. Next, audience. Who is the audience or the client the student is concerned in doing the task? So it identifies whom the students need to convince of validity and success of their solutions for the problem. In that particular performance task in TED 4, our audience is Ma'am Irish Tan, where she will evaluate our work or output. Situation. What is the setting or context? What are its constraints and opportunities? So in that PT we created, we are tasked by pairs so we can collaborate with our classmates and divide the given task. Next, product or performance. What specific performance or product is expected? So our product or output in our final PT during assessment of Learning 1 is a portfolio that is a compilation of all the tasks that is given to us for the semester, where we have to create our own lesson plan, test questionnaires, item analysis, frequency table, and so on. Lastly, standards. Standard states how will the performance or product be judged. So these are scoring rubrics that is attached on the given task that will serve as a guide in evaluating our output. As we have observed, Ma'am Irish attached a scoring rubric that will serve as a basis on how she will rate our work. So there are three possible product and performances. These are written, oral, and visual. Aligned with the written, this comprises essay, portfolios, and research report. So we all know what are essay, portfolios, and research report. Oral. This includes debate, speech, and demo teaching. So we also done this during last semester. Visual. This includes collage, scrapbook, and computer graphic. So that's all for today's discussion, and I will give the virtual floor to my colleague, Ms. Kamasin, to continue our discussion for today. Thank you.
Good day once again. So let's now proceed to differentiating performance tasks for diverse learners. So first, who are these diverse learners? So diverse learners include children and students of all abilities from racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And it is considered as an inclusive education because since it is diverse, it promotes as an education for all, no matter who you are. So even if you are one of PW students, a diverse learners is open for all. So and we are an example of diverse learners because as we all know, DDOSC is an inclusive education or learning. Since it is diverse, of course there is diversity in the classroom. Get to know your students, re-evaluate your teaching materials, be willing to address inequality, connect the families and community, and meet diverse learning needs. And let's now proceed to the different types of learners. So such as auditory and musical learners, visual and spatial learners, verbal learners, logical and mathematical learners, physical and kinesthetic learners, social interpersonal learners, and solitary and intrapersonal learners. So first is the auditory and musical learners. So these learners are mostly to participate in class. They like to hear solutions and example explained to them. And they love also music subject. Anything in music, they like it. It is part of their studies or wants as a student. Second is the visual and spatial learners. So these learners are something quiet. They prefer to visually presented. In instance, a teacher is having a interpretation question related on their topic, and this kind of learners, as what they've seen on the board or in the presentation, presented, they are easily to get an answer, but they only keep it on their minds. They are not a student who's mostly to hands up if they know the answer or they have an opinion or ideas, so they prefer to keep it until they code, just like that. So the third one is the verbal learners. So this one is opposite from the visual and spatial learners. If the visual and spatial learners are the quiet one, this type of learner is the talkative one. So they mostly love to talk, no? Share their ideas from that class. The fourth one is the logical and mathematical learners. And this kind of learners, as usual, these learners are likely to learn logic and mathematics. They love numbers, anything in math. They are fast learners of it. So that's it. The fifth is the physical and kinesthetic learners. So these learners, if we have lovers in math and logic, we have this also, the kind of learners who are physically active. They love to participate in this kind of activity that may boost in their daily life learning. So that's it. And also these physical and kinesthetic learners, they are likely on by doing and hands-on learners. Next is the social interpersonal learners. So this type of learners is they love to collaborate from everyone, especially in group activity. So they are showy type of learners. They are active from group rather than individualized. And speaking of individualized, this is called the solitary and intrapersonal learners. So they are these learners that can be any, but they are such compatible by doing alone. So they prefer to learn something alone. It makes them comfortable as they study. So the last kind of learners is these nature learners. So these learners are the nature lover. They love learning, interacting with nature. So okay. And now let's proceed to the differentiated instruction techniques to reach diverse learners' needs. So first is the key vocabulary. So it is considered matching key vocabulary with one of the other differentiated instruction techniques below to engage all your students. So create a memory match game to learn and review key vocabulary terms. Next is the prior knowledge links. So have students interview each other to learn about their own individual experience and reference to a certain. And then that's it. So the next one is the called higher order thinking. So be accomplished using group questioning or a more formal assessment. So that's all. And these are the three elements of differentiated instruction. First is the content. So this is the knowledge, understanding, and skills, or KUD. So the students needs to learn. That's it. So the second one is the process. So how students come to understand and make sense the content. The third one is the product. So ways for students to demonstrate what they have come to know, understand, and be able to do after an extended period learning. So that's it. The three elements of differentiated instruction: the content, process, and the products. So I guess we are now on the last topic. So this is the scoring rubrics, the types, components, development, interpretation, and utilization. So first, what is rubrics? So rubrics, this is the evaluative criteria defined by a scoring rubrics should focus on the specific skills the teacher wants to measure. In other words, your rubrics should directly align with your learning objectives. So, therefore, it makes sense to complete the creation, adaptation, or modification of a scoring rubrics. So, during the second stage of the um, backward design process. In this chapter, you will explore different types of rubrics along with how to develop effective rubrics. So, these are the type of rubrics. analytic rubrics, developmental rubrics, holistic rubrics, and checklists. What is analytic rubrics? So, analytic rubrics resemble a grid with the criteria for a student product listed in the leftmost column and with levels of performance listed across the top row, often using numbers and or descriptive tags. So the cell within the center or of the rubric may be left blank or maybe contain descriptions of what the specified criteria look like. So for each level of performance, so when scoring with analytic rubric, each of the criteria is scored individually. Next is the developmental rubric. So the main distinction between developmental rubrics and other analytic trait rubrics is that the purpose of developmental rubrics is not to evaluate and to evaluate an end product or performance. So just like that. Instead, developmental rubrics are designed to answer the question, for example, like to what extent are students um, uh, to what extent are students who engage in our program or services developing these skills, ability, value, or etc. Just like that. So, but generally, this type of rubric would be based on a theory development. So, just remember that. And the next one is the holistic rubric. So, with a holistic rubrics, the rater assign a single score. So, usually on a 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 point scale and based on an overall judgment of the students so of the student's work. The rater matches an entire piece of student work to a single description on the scale. Last is the checklist. So as you can see on the example below, so when you are using a checklist, every decision is binary. So in instance, yes or no, present or absent, pass or fail, and etc. So most rubrics can be converted rather directly into a checklist. To end this topic, let me present to you the key to developing strong scoring rubrics because it helps us to assess and it is a guide to us on how to develop strong scoring rubrics. No? And of course, the steps for developing performance tests. As we all know, we are a future educator. And these are the key to developing strong scoring rubrics. So first is align evaluative criteria with learning objectives. Ensure evaluative criteria can and will be taught during your instruction. Select as few evaluative criteria as needed. After designing your rubric, use the rubric to assess if you have included all of the components of a strong assessment tool. And these are the steps for developing performance tasks. So first is identify learning objectives, determine the task format, design clear task instructions, create a rubric for assessment, make the task authentic and relevant, of course. So allow for students' choice and creativity, provide support and resources, and the last is assess and provide feedback. So I guess we finish our topic for today, our lesson. So I hope guys you have a lot of learnings of it, and that's all. Thank you for listening